I speak not to comfort you, but to awaken you. The world is not ruled by kindness alone, nor do crowns rest upon the heads of the innocent. Power is never gifted. It is taken, defended, and preserved by those who understand human nature as it truly is, not as they wish it to be. Men are quick to praise virtue, yet quicker to abandon it when fear or desire calls. A ruler who trusts only morality will soon lose both his throne and his people. I have walked the halls of power and watched great men fall, not because they were weak, but because they were naive. Fortune favors the bold, but she obeys only those who are prepared. To lead is to choose, and to choose is to accept that every decision carries a cost. Mercy may win hearts, but discipline secures states. Love is fragile. Fear is reliable, and wisdom lies in knowing when to use each. Listen carefully, not as students of hope, but as observers of truth. For those who understand the mechanics of power will shape history, while those who ignore them will be ruled by it. Focuses on the life of Niccolò Machiavelli, not as a distant historical figure, but as a man shaped by chaos, ambition, failure, and observation. He was born in Florence in 1469, a city that was not merely beautiful, but brutally political. Florence was surrounded by rival states, threatened by foreign powers, and torn apart by internal conspiracies. From the beginning, Machiavelli lived in a world where survival depended on alliances, timing, and understanding the weaknesses of others. This environment trained his mind long before he ever put pen to paper. He did not grow up believing in ideal kingdoms or moral perfection. He grew up watching governments rise and collapse, families gain power and lose everything overnight, and leaders betray principles to save their positions. Machiavelli was not a king, a general, or a noble by birth. He was a civil servant, a diplomat, and an observer. This position mattered deeply, because it placed him close enough to power to understand it, but far enough away to see it clearly. He negotiated with ruthless leaders, witnessed deception firsthand, and learned that public virtue often hides private ambition. When Florence became a republic, Machiavelli was appointed to important diplomatic missions. He traveled, listened, watched, and remembered. He studied people more than laws, behavior more than promises. These experiences shaped his belief that political reality does not operate on moral wishes, but unpredictable. Human instincts like fear, greed, loyalty, and survival. One of the most important influences on Machiavelli's thinking was his encounter with Cesare Borgia, a man who embodied calculated power. Machiavelli admired not Borgia's cruelty, but his effectiveness. He saw how decisiveness, strategy, and controlled fear could stabilize territories that kindness had failed to protect. For Machiavelli, this was not evil for its own sake. It was order replacing chaos. His observations taught him that leadership is judged not by intentions, but by outcomes. A ruler who wishes to be good at all times will be destroyed by those who are not, and the people will suffer as a result. Machiavelli's career collapsed when the Medici family returned to power in Florence. He was dismissed, arrested, tortured, and exiled from political life. This moment is critical to understanding his work. The fall from influence stripped away any illusion he might have had about loyalty or fairness in politics. Friends disappeared, promises meant nothing, and survival became personal. Isolated in the countryside, cut off from the world he once navigated, Machiavelli began to write. Writing was not an academic exercise for him. It was an act of survival and relevance. The Prince was born from this exile, not as a moral guidebook, but as a practical manual designed to demonstrate his understanding of power to those who ruled. When Machiavelli wrote about leadership, he did so as someone who had lost everything by trusting systems that failed him. His tone is calm, precise, and unsentimental, because emotion had already cost him too much. He was not interested in what leaders claimed to believe. He analyzed what they did when their power was threatened. He believed that history repeats itself because human nature does not change. Ambition, fear, love, hatred, and self-interest drive people across all eras. A wise ruler studies these patterns and prepares for them instead of denying them. This keynote emphasizes that Machiavelli never intended to corrupt leaders. He intended to expose reality. He believed that pretending politics is moral by default is more dangerous than admitting it is not. By understanding how power truly works, a leader can prevent disorder, foreign domination, and internal collapse. Stability, for Machiavelli, was a higher good than moral purity. A weak but virtuous ruler invites invasion, rebellion, and suffering, while a strong and disciplined ruler can maintain peace, even if his methods appear harsh. Machiavelli also understood the psychology of the masses. He observed that people are often grateful when things are stable, even if they criticize methods privately. People value security more than ideals when chaos threatens their lives. This insight came not from theory, but from lived experience in a city that constantly changed rulers. He saw how public opinion shifts quickly, how loyalty fades under pressure, and how fear can unify populations faster than love. These observations were uncomfortable, but they were consistent. The first keynote shows Machiavelli as a realist shaped by loss, not a villain obsessed with manipulation. His ideas were forged in instability, betrayal, and political survival. He wrote for those who carry responsibility, not for those who judge from safety. His life demonstrates that power is not an abstract concept, but a force that determines who eats, who rules, and who disappears from history. Understanding this force was, for Machiavelli, an obligation rather than a choice. By examining his life, we see why his ideas remain relevant. He did not invent cruelty, he described it. He did not celebrate deception. He explained its effectiveness. His work forces readers to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership and human behavior. The first keynote is not about praising Machiavelli, but about understanding the environment that created him. A man raised in chaos will write about control. A man betrayed by politics will write about power without illusions. His life was the laboratory, and his books were the results. The core of Machiavelli's philosophy, which is rooted in realism rather than idealism. He rejected the comforting illusions that dominated political thought before him, especially the belief that leaders succeed by being morally perfect. Machiavelli argued that politics does not operate in a world of ideals, but in a world shaped by fear, ambition, necessity, and chance. He believed that many thinkers before him described how rulers ought to behave, but almost none described how rulers actually behave. This gap between theory and reality was, in his view, the reason so many states collapsed. A ruler who governs according to imagination rather than truth prepares his own downfall. At the heart of Machiavelli's thinking is his understanding of human nature. He believed humans are not consistently good or loyal. People, he observed, are grateful when it benefits them and forgetful when circumstances change. They are quick to praise generosity but quicker to resent taxes that fund it. They admire strength but abandon weak leaders at the first sign of danger. For Machiavelli, this was not cynicism, but observation. He did not claim people are evil by default. He claimed they are self-interested, emotional, and unreliable under pressure. Any system of power that ignores this reality, he argued, is doomed to fail. From this understanding flows his most controversial ideas. Machiavelli believed that a ruler must learn how not to be good when circumstances demand it. This does not mean embracing cruelty for pleasure, but accepting that moral restraint can be a liability in a hostile world. If a ruler always chooses kindness, he invites exploitation by rivals who do not share the same restraint. Machiavelli believed necessity governs political action. When the survival of the state is at risk, moral hesitation becomes dangerous. In such moments, a ruler must act decisively, even if those actions appear harsh or unjust. One of Machiavelli's most misunderstood ideas is his discussion of fear and love. He famously argued that it is safer for a ruler to be feared than loved, if he cannot be both. This statement is often taken as an endorsement of tyranny, but his reasoning is more precise. Love, he argued, is based on obligation and emotion, both of which are fragile. Fear, when properly managed, is based on consequences and predictability. A ruler who is feared but not hated creates stability, because people understand the cost of disobedience. Hatred, however, leads to rebellion. Machiavelli therefore advised restraint, not brutality. Punishment should be swift, justified, and limited, while generosity should be cautious and strategic. Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of appearance in leadership. He believed people judge rulers more by what they see than by what is true. Most people, he observed, do not have access to the inner workings of power. They respond to symbols, victories, confidence, and outcomes. A ruler must therefore appear virtuous even when acting pragmatically. This idea does not promote hypocrisy for its own sake, but recognizes perception as a political force. In leadership, reality is often shaped by belief. If people believe a ruler is strong, just, and capable, they behave accordingly. If they perceive weakness or indecision, instability follows. Another central element of Machiavelli's philosophy is the concept of fortune. He believed that chance plays a significant role in human affairs, but he rejected the idea that people are powerless before it. Fortune, in his view, favors those who are bold, prepared, and adaptable. He compared fortune to a river that floods and destroys everything in its path when uncontained, but can be controlled through preparation and foresight. Leaders who rely on luck without building defenses will be overwhelmed when circumstances change. Those who anticipate change and act decisively can shape outcomes, even in uncertain conditions. Machiavelli placed great value on adaptability. He argued that leaders fail not because their methods are wrong, but because they refuse to change them when conditions demand it. A strategy that works in one moment may be disastrous. In another, wise rulers understand the times and adjust their behavior accordingly. Rigidity, even when rooted in virtue, becomes weakness. This belief reflects Machiavelli's deep study of history. He saw repeated patterns of rise and fall, often caused by leaders clinging to outdated methods while the world around them evolved. His philosophy also addresses the relationship between ethics and responsibility. Machiavelli did not deny the value of morality. He questioned its application in politics. He believed private morality and public responsibility operate under different rules. A ruler is responsible not only for his own conscience, but for the safety and stability of the state. If moral purity leads to chaos, invasion, or civil war, then morality has failed its purpose. For Machiavelli, the ultimate measure of leadership was not intention, but consequence. Actions are judged by what they preserve or destroy. This keynote highlights that Machiavelli's realism was not rooted in pessimism, but in discipline. He believed that understanding the darker aspects of human behavior allows leaders to prevent greater harm. Ignoring these aspects, he argued, does not make society more virtuous. It makes it vulnerable. His philosophy demands emotional control, strategic thinking, and acceptance of responsibility. Leaders must be willing to bear moral burden to protect collective stability. This is why Machiavelli wrote, "Not for ideas, but for those who hold power and must make decisions under pressure." Machiavelli also challenged the idea that political success comes from moral consistency alone. He believed that consistency without judgment leads to predictability, and predictability invites manipulation. Effective leadership requires balance, timing, and discretion. A ruler must know when to be generous and when to be firm, when to forgive and when to punish, when to wait and when to strike. These decisions cannot be governed by fixed moral formulas. They require situational awareness and psychological insight. The second keynote reveals Machiavelli as a thinker obsessed with survival, order, and continuity. He feared disorder more than he feared harsh rule. In his view, chaos destroys lives indiscriminately, while strong governance, even when imperfect, provides structure. His philosophy challenges readers to confront uncomfortable truths about power and responsibility. It does not ask whether a decision feels good, but whether it works. It does not ask whether a leader is admired, but whether the state endures. By stripping politics of illusion, Machiavelli forced future generations to face reality without decoration. His philosophy does not promise justice in every action, but it seeks stability over collapse. It assumes humans are flawed and builds systems that account for those flaws, rather than denying them. This keynote is not about encouraging cruelty, but about rejecting naivete. It presents leadership as a burden, carried by those willing to act when others hesitate. It demands clarity, courage, and acceptance of consequences, in a world where hesitation often costs more than action. Why the Prince remains one of the most influential and controversial works ever written about power. Machiavelli did not write this book as a philosophical dream or a moral sermon. He wrote it as a practical response to political instability, personnel exile, and the brutal realities he had witnessed throughout his life. The Prince is often misunderstood because readers approach it expecting guidance on virtue, when Machiavelli was offering guidance on survival. His purpose was not to define what a good person should be, but to explain what an effective ruler must do in a dangerous and unpredictable world. At its core, The prince challenges the traditional belief that morality alone is sufficient for leadership. Machiavelli observed that rulers who tried to govern purely through kindness, honesty, and mercy often lost their states to those who were more calculating. He did not argue against morality itself. Rather, he argued against blind moral rigidity. According to Machiavelli, a ruler must be willing to act against conventional morality when circumstances demand it, because the survival of the state outweighs personal virtue. In his view, the collapse of a state brings far greater suffering than the moral discomfort caused by difficult decisions. One of the key reasons the prince still matters is its brutal honesty about power. Machiavelli openly described tactics that many leaders use secretly but refused to acknowledge publicly. He believed hypocrisy was more dangerous than truth. By exposing how power truly operates, he aimed to reduce chaos caused by ignorance. A ruler who understands manipulation, fear, loyalty, and ambition can control them. A ruler who denies their existence becomes their victim. The book strips away romantic illusions and replaces them with psychological insight. Machiavelli placed great emphasis on control, not domination. He warned that uncontrolled cruelty leads to hatred, and hatred leads to rebellion. This distinction is often ignored by critics. Machiavelli did not advise rulers to be endlessly violent. He advised them to be precise. Punishment, he argued, should be swift, limited, and purposeful. Carried out once, if necessary, rather than repeated in ways that keep wounds open. Mercy, when overused, breeds disorder, which ultimately harms more people. In this way, Machiavelli framed harsh actions as tools to prevent long-term instability rather than expressions of tyranny. Another enduring element of The Prince is its focus on reputation. Machiavelli understood that rulers exist under constant observation. People judge leaders not by hidden intentions, but by visible results. A ruler who maintains order, protects borders, and ensures stability will be forgiven for methods that would otherwise be condemned. Failure, however, exposes every flaw. Success creates legitimacy. This idea resonates deeply in modern politics, business, and leadership, where outcomes often overshadow ethics in public perception. The Prince also introduces the concept of adaptability as a requirement for survival. Machiavelli believed that leaders who fail are often those who cling to strategies that once worked but no longer fit new circumstances. History, in his view, is a cycle of repetition because human nature remains constant, but situations change. A wise ruler studies history not to imitate blindly, but to understand patterns and apply them intelligently. Flexibility, not stubborn virtue, determines longevity and power. Machiavelli's treatment of fortune is another reason the book remains relevant. He acknowledged that chance influences events, but he rejected fatalism. Fortune, he argued, favors those who prepare and act boldly. Leaders who wait passively for circumstances to improve surrender control to others. Those who take initiative shape events in their favor. This idea aligns strongly with modern leadership thinking, where proactive strategy consistently outperforms reactive behavior. The controversy surrounding The Prince is itself proof of its power. For centuries, readers have argued over whether Machiavelli was evil, immoral, or simply honest. Religious institutions condemned the book because it separated politics from divine morality. Philosophers criticized it for encouraging deception, yet rulers across generations quietly studied it because it worked. This tension between public rejection and private use highlights Machiavelli's accuracy. People often condemn truths that expose their own behavior. The Prince also redefined the relationship between ethics and responsibility. Machiavelli believed that leaders carry a burden. Unlike ordinary citizens, their decisions affect thousands or millions of lives. A private individual can afford moral purity because their choices have limited consequences. A ruler cannot, if refusing to act leads to invasion, civil war, or collapse. Then moral restraint becomes negligence. This argument does not glorify cruelty. It reframes responsibility. Leaders must accept blame to protect the collective. Modern readers continue to find The Prince unsettling because it mirrors realities they recognize but prefer not to admit. Political campaigns, corporate power struggles, international relations, and even social media influence reflect Machiavellian principles daily. Image management, strategic alliances, controlled narratives, and calculated risks dominate these arenas. Machiavelli did not invent these behaviors. Nameth them. His relevance persists because human nature has not changed, only the stage on which it performs. The book also serves as a warning. Machiavelli wrote not only for rulers, but indirectly for those ruled. By understanding how power functions, people can recognize manipulation, false virtue, and strategic performance. Knowledge reduces vulnerability. This dual function is often overlooked. The Prince equips leaders to rule, but it also equips observers to understand them. In Tissensei, the book is not propaganda. It is exposure. Another reason The Prince endures is its clarity. Machiavelli's writing is direct, structured, and free from ornament. He avoids abstract speculation and focuses on concrete examples drawn from history. Roman emperors, Italian city-states, and contemporary rulers serve as case studies. This grounded approach gives the book credibility. Machiavelli does not ask readers to believe him because of authority, but because evidence supports his conclusions. The Prince also reflects Machiavelli's personal struggle for relevance and survival. Writing the book was an attempt to return to political life by demonstrating his usefulness to those in power. This context adds depth to its message. The book is not written from comfort, but from exclusion. It carries the urgency of someone who understands how quickly power can disappear. That urgency gives the work its sharp edge and emotional restraint. Ultimately, the third keynote reveals The Prince as a manual for navigating imperfect systems, rather than escaping them. Machiavelli did not believe humans could be made virtuous through instruction alone. He believed systems must be built with human flaws in mind. Idealism, without structure, invites disaster. Realism, without restraint, invites tyranny. The Prince attempts to balance these forces by prioritizing stability while acknowledging moral cost. The continued relevance of The Prince lies in its refusal to lie. It does not promise fairness, happiness, or justice in every decision. It promises survival through understanding. That promise remains compelling because power still determines outcomes in every society. Machiavelli's work forces readers to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership, responsibility, and human behavior. It asks not whether power should exist, but how it operates when it does. Examines Machiavelli's controversial legacy and the profound impact of his ideas on politics, leadership, and the way we understand human behavior. Machiavelli has often been labeled ruthless, cynical, or even immoral, yet this reputation oversimplifies the depth of his thought. He was neither a cheerleader for cruelty nor an advocate for blind deceit. His work arose from a careful study of reality, history, and human nature. He observed that moral ideals alone cannot sustain states, and that ignoring the harsh truths of human behavior results in disorder, rebellion, and collapse. His legacy, therefore, is not about promoting evil, but about presenting an unsentimental vision of power and responsibility that challenges conventional thinking. Machiavelli's work forced society to confront the gap between appearance and reality. Leaders, he observed, are judged not by their intentions, but by outcomes. This emphasis on effectiveness over perception unsettled moralists of his time and continues to provoke debate. Many critics accused him of endorsing manipulation and deceit, but in truth, he simply exposed strategies that rulers have always used to maintain control. By acknowledging these strategies openly, Machiavelli gave rulers tools to govern more effectively, but he also provided scholars, citizens, and later historians with a lens to understand the often hidden mechanics of power. One significant element of his legacy is the concept of pragmatism in leadership. Machiavelli argued that rulers cannot rely solely on abstract principles or universal morality. The world of politics is fluid, shaped by fortune, human ambition, and unforeseen events. A leader's ability to navigate this uncertainty requires a combination of foresight, adaptability, and decisiveness. For example, a ruler who clings rigidly to kindness and virtue without regard for practical consequences risks destabilizing his state. Machiavelli's realism, while sometimes seen as harsh, is ultimately a guide to prevent greater harm through careful calculation and preparedness. His legacy also extends to the psychological understanding of both rulers and the ruled. Machiavelli observed that people are motivated by self-interest, fear, and desire. They are quick to support those who appear strong and decisive, and quick to turn against those who seem weak or indecisive. Understanding these tendencies allows leaders to harness loyalty, mitigate rebellion, and foster stability. Conversely, ignoring these patterns leads to vulnerability. Machiavelli's insight into human nature was rooted in lived experience, observation of historical events, and careful study of past rulers. This focus on behavioral reality, rather than idealized morality, distinguishes his work from earlier political thought. Machiavelli also influenced the way states interact with each other. He highlighted the role of strategic alliances, military preparedness, and opportunistic decisions. Power is never static, and external threats require calculated responses. A state that relies on goodwill alone is likely to be exploited. Therefore, his legacy encompasses not only internal governance, but also international strategy. His principles continue to inform modern diplomacy, military planning, and realpolitik, showing that his insights extend far beyond Renaissance Florence. Another key aspect of his legacy is the tension between fear and love in leadership. Machiavelli argued that while it is ideal for a ruler to be both loved and feared, it is safer to be feared if both cannot be achieved. This distinction is often misunderstood as an endorsement of tyranny, but it is more accurately a reflection of his pragmatic approach. Fear, when exercised judiciously and without provoking hatred, creates order and obedience, whereas love alone is unreliable. This understanding of human psychology, combined with a strategic approach to governance, is a cornerstone of his enduring influence. Machiavelli's influence is evident not only in politics, but also in business, strategy, and leadership education. Modern executives, strategists, and diplomats study his principles to understand negotiation, influence, and organizational power. The ethical debates his work provokes are equally important, prompting reflection on the balance between moral values and practical necessity. His legacy is therefore dual. It equips leaders with actionable insights and challenges societies to consider the costs and consequences of power. Furthermore, Machiavelli's controversial reputation contributes to his lasting relevance. The label Machiavellian has become synonymous with cunning and strategic calculation, often with negative connotations. However, this simplification obscures the complexity of his thought. He did not celebrate deceit for its own sake. He celebrated understanding reality as it is, recognizing the difference between appearance and truth, between intention and outcome, is central to his philosophy. His critics often focused on the surface of his advice, missing the deeper aim: to provide a realistic framework for maintaining stability in a world governed by human ambition. Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of history in shaping political judgment. He studied the successes and failures of Roman leaders, Italian city-states, and contemporary rulers to derive lessons applicable to his own time. This historical awareness reinforced his understanding that human behavior is consistent over time, even as circumstances change. By learning from the past, rulers can anticipate challenges, seize opportunities, and avoid the mistakes of those who preceded them. This analytical approach contributes to his enduring legacy as a thinker who combined empirical observation with philosophical insight. Additionally, Machiavelli's work underscores the burdens of leadership. Rulers are responsible for outcomes that affect entire populations. Moral decisions in private life may have limited consequences, but public leadership carries stakes measured in lives, stability, and security. His writings insist that those who wield power cannot escape responsibility, and the moral and strategic demands of leadership often conflict. Machiavelli's honesty about this burden makes his work timeless, as leaders across eras face similar dilemmas. Machiavelli's legacy is also marked by the interplay between ethics and effectiveness. He demonstrated that rigid adherence to conventional morality is insufficient for governing a state. Ethical ideals must be balanced with practical considerations to ensure survival. This does not endorse immorality for its own sake, but emphasizes responsibility and strategic judgment. His philosophy, therefore, is not a guide to tyranny, but a framework for understanding how leadership operates in the real world. Ultimately, the fourth keynote portrays Machiavelli as a thinker who changed the way humanity understands power. He exposed the mechanisms of politics, emphasized realism over idealism, and challenged generations to reconcile morality with necessity. His work endures because it addresses truths that are uncomfortable yet universal. Humans are imperfect, societies are complex, and leadership requires both wisdom and courage. The legacy of Machiavelli is not simply historical, it is practical, psychological, and philosophical, providing lessons that remain deeply relevant in politics, leadership, and life. On the real-world lessons derived from Machiavelli's philosophy, demonstrating how his insights into power, leadership, and human behavior remain relevant centuries after they were written. Machiavelli was not a theorist in the abstract. He was a practitioner of observation, a student of history, and a critic of the illusions that often blind rulers and citizens alike. His work teaches that the principles governing human behavior and leadership are timeless, and understanding them is essential not only for rulers, but for anyone who navigates power dynamics in society. These lessons extend far beyond Renaissance Florence, offering guidance for politics, business, social structures, and interpersonal relationships. One of the central lessons is the importance of adaptability. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized that the world is unpredictable, and circumstances change constantly. Leaders, organizations, and individuals who cling to fixed ideas of morality, strategy, or practice are vulnerable when situations shift. Success depends on the ability to adjust tactics, methods, and approaches according to the changing environment. This flexibility is not weakness. It is prudence. Historical examples from his own life and the lives of rulers he studied demonstrate that those who anticipate change, embrace new strategies, and act decisively endure, while those who resist transformation fall prey to fortune and miscalculation. Closely related to adaptability is the understanding of human nature. Machiavelli observed that people are motivated by self-interest, fear, ambition, and desire. They are inconsistent, unpredictable, and often guided more by emotion than reason. Leaders who fail to recognize this are unprepared for betrayal, manipulation, or unexpected opposition. By understanding the drives of the people they govern, rulers can manage loyalty, mitigate, and harness motivation effectively. This is equally applicable in modern leadership, whether in corporate management, political governance, or social influence. Understanding the psychology of others allows one to anticipate reactions, plan strategically, and build resilient systems. Another key lesson is the necessity of decisive action. Machiavelli demonstrated that hesitation can be fatal in leadership. Opportunities are fleeting, and threats are immediate. Decisive action does not mean recklessness. It means informed, calculated, and timely responses that prioritize stability, security, and long-term success over temporary comfort or moral reassurance. This principle extends to modern life as well. Individuals and organizations that act with informed decisiveness often achieve outcomes that are unattainable to those paralyzed by overanalysis or fear of judgment. Fear, when exercised judiciously, creates predictability and stability. A ruler who is feared yet just can prevent rebellion, maintain authority, and ensure the smooth functioning of governance. The strategic use of perception is another enduring lesson. Machiavelli understood that reality is often interpreted through appearances. People rarely witness the full truth behind decisions, but they respond to symbols, actions, and outcomes. Leaders who manage perception carefully can influence public opinion, strengthen legitimacy, and prevent disorder. This insight is particularly relevant in an era dominated by media, communication, and public scrutiny. The ability to present authority, competence, and confidence, even when facing challenges, shapes both internal cohesion and external reputation. Those who rely solely on luck are at the mercy of events, while those who prepare strategically, anticipate challenges, and act proactively can influence outcomes in their favor. Machiavelli differentiated between private morality and public responsibility, emphasizing that leaders must prioritize the welfare of the state or organization above personal comfort. Decisions may require morally difficult choices, but the consequences of inaction often outweigh the discomfort of action. Leadership carries a burden that demands courage, accountability, and the acceptance of responsibility for outcomes that affect many lives. This perspective reframes morality as a tool for collective survival rather than an individual ideal, reinforcing the seriousness of governance and management. Machiavelli also encourages continuous learning from history and experience. He analyzed the successes and failures of past rulers to extract patterns and insights. Modern leaders can adopt this approach by studying case studies, analyzing trends, and applying lessons from prior events. Knowledge of historical precedent allows anticipation of challenges, informed decision-making, and avoidance of repeated mistakes. Machiavelli's insistence on empirical observation over abstract speculation underscores the practical nature of his philosophy. Leadership is a craft, not merely a theoretical exercise. Collaboration and alliances are further lessons embedded in Machiavelli's thought. No leader operates in isolation. Success depends on building networks, fostering loyalty among supporters, and managing rivals effectively. Strategic alliances provide strength, protect against threats, and create opportunities for growth. However, alliances require careful management, as shifting loyalties and competing interests are constant realities. Machiavelli teaches that understanding the motivations of allies and adversaries alike is crucial for sustained influence and stability. His lessons are not prescriptions for cruelty, deception, or amorality, but for clarity, preparedness, and strategic thinking. The principles he outlines transcend time and place, offering insights into leadership, decision-making, and influence that remain applicable today. Machiavelli's work endures because it addresses the realities of human interaction and power dynamics that persist across generations, reminding readers that knowledge, adaptability, and strategic foresight are the keys to survival and success. His life, shaped by observation, exile, and the harsh realities of power, teaches that leadership is never simple, and morality alone cannot sustain states. The Prince remains relevant, not because it glorifies cruelty, but because it exposes the mechanics of power, the consequences of action and inaction, and the delicate balance between fear, respect, and loyalty. Machiavelli's lessons transcend centuries. Leaders, thinkers, and individuals alike must accept that the world is imperfect, that fortune is unpredictable, and that the choices we make carry weight far beyond our own lives. By understanding these realities, we gain insight, prepare for challenges, and navigate the complexities of power with wisdom rather than illusion. His enduring legacy is not a guide to tyranny but a call to confront truth, to act decisively, and to recognize that in the pursuit of stability and success, knowledge, foresight, and prudence are the greatest tools any leader or any human can wield.